Your name is Guardsman Erickson Vale, service number 881, 3rd Mordian, 3rd Company, Mordian Iron Guard, 47th Regiment. You were born in Hive Tertius on Mordian, trained in the Schola Militarum from age 10, inducted into the Guard at 16. You've served for 7 years across 4 campaigns. Remember these facts. Hold them close, because soon you won't be sure which memories are real and which are gifts from something that wants you to forget who you were. The planet is designated Pythos Secundus, a frontier world on the edge of the Segmentum Obscurus. Your regiment deployed here 6 weeks ago to suppress a minor heretic uprising. Standard operation, overwhelming Imperial force against scattered rebels. Should have been finished in days. Then the warp storms came. They appeared without warning, massive tears in reality that turned the sky purple and made navigation impossible. All Vox communication beyond line of sight went dead. Astropathic communication ceased entirely. Your regiment's sanctioned psychers started screaming and had to be sedated. The naval transport that brought you here retreated to orbit, then fled the system entirely when the storms intensified. You were abandoned. 5,000 guardsmen dug into defensive positions around forward base Tertius, waiting for extraction that wasn't coming. Could be worse, your squadmate Corporal Hendrick said during week 2. He was cleaning his lasgun for the 4th time that day. Nervous habit. Could be orcs, could be Tyranids, could be actually fighting instead of just sitting here with our thumbs up our asses. Could be dead, Private Voss added. She was younger than you. Barely 18, still optimistic enough to believe the Navy would return. I'm fine with boring. Boring means we go home. You were checking defensive positions, trenches, firing lines, fields of fire. Everything according to Mordian Iron Guard standards. Perfect geometric precision. Overlapping kill zones, redundant defensive layers. Your training had been thorough. Every guardsman knew their position, their responsibility, their duty. The Emperor protects. You believed that then. You really did. The dreams started that night. You were in the command bunker, standing behind Colonel Vardis as he reviewed tactical displays. But this wasn't memory. You'd never been inside the command bunker. This was something else. The colonel was speaking with his officers, pointing at a map of the defensive perimeter. The eastern approach is our weak point. If the enemy has any tactical sense, they'll probe there first. But in your dream, you could see the map differently. Patterns emerged. Supply lines, sight lines, elevation advantages. The eastern approach wasn't the weak point. It was a trap, yes, but the real vulnerability was the northwestern sector, where overlapping fields of fire had a 60-meter gap due to terrain. You tried to speak, to tell the colonel, but you had no voice in this dream. You were an observer, a ghost, watching strategy sessions you had no right to witness. The perspective shifted. Now you were looking down at the entire base from above, an angle impossible without aircraft. You could see enemy positions in the hills, count their numbers, assess their equipment. You knew their strength. Approximately 400 heretic militia, poorly armed, no heavy weapons. The perspective shifted again. Now you were looking at the same scene, but different, as if time had moved forward. The enemy was attacking, but not from the east. They were hitting the northwestern gap, exactly where you'd identified the weakness. Your forces were scrambling, caught off guard, taking casualties. Then the perspective shifted a 3rd time. Same attack, but your forces were ready. Heavy weapons teams positioned perfectly. The enemy walked into a killing field. Complete victory. 2 futures. 2 possibilities. One where your forces failed to cover the gap. One where they did. You woke up gasping, your body covered in sweat despite the cold night air. Just a dream, you muttered. Just a stress dream. But you couldn't shake the clarity of it. The detail, the certainty that what you'd seen was real, or could be real. Morning formation. Colonel Vardas addressed the regiment, his voice amplified by voxcasters. The warp storms continue. Naval Command has not responded to any communication attempts. We are effectively isolated until the storms clear. All personnel will maintain defensive positions and standard readiness protocols. The Emperor protects, and we are his Iron Guard. We will endure. The Emperor protects. 5,000 voices responded in unison. Yours among them. After formation, you approached your squad sergeant, a 20-year veteran named Corvus, who'd survived campaigns you'd only heard about in training lectures. Sergeant, permission to speak about tactical concerns. Corvus looked at you with tired eyes. Tactical concerns, Vale? We're dug in tighter than an administratum bureaucrat's purse strings. What concerns? The northwestern sector, Sergeant. There's a gap in the overlapping fields of fire, approximately 60 meters, where attackers could advance with minimal exposure. If the enemy has competent scouts, they'll identify it. Corvus frowned. How do you know about gaps in the defensive plan? You're not assigned to tactical planning. I noticed it, Sergeant. Looking at the terrain. That was a lie. You hadn't looked at the terrain, you dreamed it. But you couldn't say that. Corvus studied you for a long moment. I'll mention it to the lieutenant. Dismissed. You returned to your position, uncertain whether you'd done the right thing. Dreams weren't tactical intelligence. Dreams were just stress and exhaustion and your brain processing information randomly. Except this hadn't felt random. It had felt like knowledge. That night, the dream returned. But this time it was different. You weren't observing the command bunker. You were somewhere else. A vast library with shelves stretching infinitely in all directions. The books were impossible. Their pages turned themselves. Their text rewrote itself as you watched. Languages you didn't know becoming clear as you focused on them. A voice spoke. Not sound exactly. More like thought implanted directly into your consciousness. Knowledge is power. You seek to protect your brothers. I offer you the knowledge to do so. You spun around, looking for the source. Saw nothing but endless shelves and impossible geometry. Who are you? You tried to ask, but no sound emerged. I am the architect of fate, the changer of ways. I am the answer to questions you haven't yet thought to ask. And you, little soldier, have caught my attention. The library dissolved. Now you were looking down at the base again, but with impossible clarity. You could see through walls, see the enemy positions kilometers away. See the branching timelines of possibility spreading forward like a tree. In one timeline, the enemy attacked tomorrow at dawn. Northwestern sector. Your forces were unprepared, 73 casualties. In another timeline, your forces reinforced the northwestern sector. The enemy attacked anyway. 8 casualties. In a third timeline, your forces set an ambush in the northwestern sector. The enemy walked into a trap. 0 friendly casualties. Complete enemy annihilation. See? Knowledge. Power. The ability to choose the best future from infinite possibilities. All I ask is that you accept my gift. Accept enlightenment. Accept change. No, you tried to say. This is heresy. This is corruption. I serve the Emperor, not... You serve survival. You serve your brothers. You serve the truth. And the truth is, your Emperor is a corpse on a throne, and I offer you life. I offer you power. I offer you the ability to save everyone you care about. The voice laughed, a sound like crystal shattering and reassembling in new patterns. But I'm patient. You'll understand soon enough. They all do. You woke up screaming. Breakfast was standard guard rations, nutritional paste, recaf substitute, protein bars that tasted like cardboard. You sat with your squad, trying to act normal, while your mind raced with the memory of that voice, that library, that impossible knowledge. You look like hell, Hendrik said. Bad sleep? Weird dreams, you admitted. Tactical stuff. Battle plans. Throne, me too, Private Voss said suddenly. I had the weirdest dream last night. I was in the command bunker watching the colonel plan defensive strategy, except I could see everything wrong with the plan. Like I had tactical training I don't actually have. You went cold. What sector? Northwestern. There's a gap in the defensive coverage, about 60 meters, where the overlapping fields of fire don't reach, you finished. I dreamed the same thing. Silence fell over the squad. Hendricks looked between you and Voss, his expression troubled. That's a weird coincidence, he said slowly. Is it? Private Marco spoke up. He was older, late 30s, kept to himself usually. Because I had a dream too, same scenario, same gap. I saw 3 different futures, one where we got hit and took heavy casualties, one where we reinforced and held, one where we set a trap. Your stomach dropped. 3 people. Same dream. Same impossible knowledge. This is bad, Hendrik said quietly. This is really bad. Dreams like that. Shared dreams. Whew. That's warp taint. That's how corruption starts. You should report it, Voss said, but her voice was uncertain. Tell the Commissar. He'll know what to do. You thought about Commissar Kellen, a brutal man who'd executed 2 guardsmen for cowardice during the heretic uprising. His solution to warp taint would be a bolt round to the skull. Quick, final. 3 more for the Emperor. Or, you said slowly, we could test it. The dream showed the enemy attacking tomorrow at dawn, northwestern sector. If that happens, if the dream is accurate, then we know it's real. Then we decide what to do. And if it is real, Marco asked, if the dream is accurate, that proves it's warp corruption. We'd be damned. We might already be damned, you said. But if the knowledge is real, we can save lives. Isn't that worth something? The squad exchanged looks, the terrible calculus of survival versus purity, damnation versus duty. We don't tell anyone yet, Hendricks decided. He was the ranking corporal. We watch, we wait. If the enemy attacks tomorrow, northwestern sector, dawn, then we'll know. And then we decide. Everyone nodded, a pact of silence, a decision that would define everything that came after. You'd already taken your first step toward corruption. You just didn't know it yet. That night, you couldn't sleep. You lay on your bedroll, staring at the canvas ceiling of your tent, thinking about the voice in your dream, the architect of fade, the changer of ways. You knew these names from training lectures about chaos. Tzeentch, the Chaos Guard of change, sorcery, scheming. The entity that corrupted psychers and plotters, that offered knowledge and power in exchange for souls. You'd been taught to resist such temptations, taught that the Emperor's light was the only truth, that any other path led to damnation. But the voice had been so reasonable, so logical. It hadn't demanded worship or sacrifice. It had simply offered knowledge, the ability to save your brothers. Was that really damnation? Or was it a tool, like a laser gun or a fortification, something that could be used for righteous purposes? You wanted to believe it was the latter. Desperately wanted to believe that accepting the gift didn't make you corrupt, didn't make you traitor, didn't make you damned. But deep down, in a part of your consciousness you were trying very hard to ignore, you knew the truth. The moment you accepted that knowledge, the moment you chose to use it instead of reporting it, you'd started down a path that had only one destination. You closed your eyes, tried to pray to the Emperor, tried to find strength in faith. Instead, you found yourself back in the infinite library, and the voice was waiting. "Welcome back, little soldier. Shall we continue your education?" He wanted to refuse, wanted to resist. "Yes," you whispered. "Teach me." The voice laughed with delight. "Oh, this is going to be wonderful." Dawn came with gunfire. You were already awake. You'd barely slept, your mind full of swirling patterns and tactical data that shouldn't exist in your consciousness. When the shooting started, you were pulling on your boots, your laser gun already charged and ready. "Contact! Northwestern sector!" The Vox crackled with panicked voice. "Enemy forces advancing through the terrain gap. All units respond." Hendricks looked at you, his face pale. Throne. The dream was real. You grabbed your gear and ran. Your entire squad mobilized, rushing toward the northwestern defensive line, where the fighting had erupted. Other squads were scrambling too, caught off guard by the attack exactly where it shouldn't have been possible. Except 3 of you had known, had seen it coming, had been warned by something that shouldn't be able to warn. You reached the defensive line and immediately saw the problem. The enemy, heretic militia wearing improvised armor and carrying a mix of Imperial and improvised weapons, had indeed found the gap in your overlapping fields of fire. They were advancing through a narrow defile, using the terrain for cover exactly as your dream had predicted. Your forces were responding, but it was chaotic. Squads weren't positioned correctly, heavy weapons teams were out of position, command was scrambling to adjust. People were dying. You watched a guardsman take a lasbolt to the throat, drop without a sound, blood pooling beneath him. Watched another get hit by a grenade, his body torn apart by shrapnel. The dream had shown you this. 73 casualties in the unprepared timeline, but it had also shown you the solution. "Hendricks," you shouted over the gunfire. "Heavy weapons team needs to relocate to position 7-7 Alpha. Elevated position. Clear sight lines down the defile." "How do you know that?" Hendricks shouted back. "Does it matter? Do it." Hendricks hesitated for only a second, then started barking orders. Your squad's heavy weapons specialist, a big man named Cross carrying a heavy bolter, hauled his weapon to the position you'd indicated. The difference was immediate. From the elevated position, Cross had a perfect angle down the defile. His heavy bolter roared, mass-reactive rounds chewing through the heretic advance. Bodies exploded. The enemy advance faltered. "Second squad, advance to position 3-2 Gamma," you continued. Again, you didn't know how you knew the position designations, they just existed in your mind, clear as if you'd studied the defensive maps for months. "Create a crossfire with first squad's position." Sergeant Corvus appeared beside you, his face splattered with blood from a wounded man he'd been treating. "Vale, what the hell are you doing? You're not in command here." "Sergeant, trust me. If second squad advances to 3-2 Gamma, we create a perfect kill zone. The enemy will be caught between 2 fields of fire with no cover." Corvus stared at you. "How do you know the tactical designation for a position you've never been to?" You didn't have an answer. "I just know, Sergeant, please, before more people die." Something in your voice, desperation, certainty, or perhaps something else, convinced him. Corvus grabbed his Vox and started relaying orders. The battle lasted another 20 minutes. With the adjustments you'd suggested, the tide turned decisively. The heretics found themselves in a crossfire with no escape route. When the shooting stopped, the enemy force was annihilated. Your casualties, 9 dead, 14 wounded. In the dream's unprepared timeline, it had been 73 dead. You'd saved 64 lives with knowledge that shouldn't exist. After the battle, you were summoned to the command bunker. Colonel Vardas sat behind a field desk, surrounded by his command staff. Commissar Kellen stood to his right, a tall, severe man in a black coat, his bolt pistol prominent on his hip. His eyes were cold as he watched you enter. "Guardsman Vale," the colonel said. His voice was measured, controlled. Sergeant Corvus reports that you provided tactical guidance during the engagement. Guidance that proved remarkably effective. I'm curious how a standard guardsman acquired such advanced tactical knowledge. This was the moment. You could lie, dissemble, try to explain it away as intuition or luck, or you could tell the truth and see what happened. I dreamed it, sir, he said quietly. Last night I dreamed the attack. Saw it from above, like looking at a tactical display. Saw 3 possible futures. One where we were unprepared, one where we responded adequately, one where we set a perfect ambush. I guided our response based on that dream. Silence. The command staff exchanged glances. Commissar Kellen's hand moved closer to his bolt pistol. Dreams, the colonel said slowly. You're claiming precognitive ability. That's psyche manifestation, guardsman. I know, sir. But I'm not the only one. You looked at Sergeant Corvus. Tell them, Sergeant. About the others. Corvus shifted uncomfortably. 3 members of my squad reported similar dreams, sir. Same tactical scenario, same details. All before the attack occurred. 3 guardsmen with simultaneous precognitive dreams, Commissar Kellen said, his voice dangerous. That's not coincidence. That's warp taint. That's corruption manifesting. That's useful intelligence that saved 64 lives, Commissar. You countered. You knew you were being insubordinate, knew you were risking a bolt round, but the words came anyway. If this is corruption, it's corruption that serves the Emperor's purposes. We defended this base, we protected his soldiers, we defeated his enemies. We don't use chaos to fight chaos, Kellen snapped. That's how corruption spreads. That's how entire regiments fall. Commissar, Colonel Vardis interrupted. The guardsman has a point. The intelligence was actionable and accurate. The results speak for themselves. He turned to you. Vale, have you experienced any other symptoms, physical changes, intrusive thoughts, compulsions? You almost lied. But something told you honesty was the better path here. I see patterns, sir. When I look at our defensive positions, I see tactical data that shouldn't be visible. Ranges, angles, probabilities. It's like someone installed a tactical cogitator in my brain. Textbook warp corruption, Kellen said. This guardsman should be executed immediately as a precaution. No, the colonel said firmly. Not yet. We're isolated, Commissar. Naval extraction is impossible while these warp storms persist. We may be stranded here for months. If these visions provide tactical advantage, we'd be fools not to exploit them. Carefully. Kellen looked like he'd bitten into something rotten. You're playing with fire, Colonel, literally. Perhaps, but I'm also keeping my regiment alive. Vardis turned back to you. Varley, you and the others who experience these dreams will report to me daily. Any changes in your condition, physical, mental, spiritual, will be documented immediately. If I determine the corruption is spreading beyond usefulness, the Commissar will execute all affected personnel. Understood? Yes, sir. Dismissed. You left the command bunker knowing you'd bought time. But you also knew the Colonel was wrong about one thing. The corruption wasn't going to stay limited. It was already spreading. You could feel it. That night, 18 more guardsmen reported dreams. The same pattern, tactical knowledge, precognitive visions, impossible clarity about future events. Word spread through the regiment despite orders to maintain silence. Brothers whispered to each other in the darkness, sharing experiences, comparing visions. Something was happening to all of you, something collective. You found yourself in a gathering near the eastern perimeter. 30 guardsmen, all reporting similar symptoms. Private Voss was there, her eyes reflecting starlight strangely, as if her pupils had changed shape. Corporal Marco was sketching something in the dirt with his finger. Complex mathematical equations he'd never studied. I can see through walls, someone whispered. Not with my eyes, but in my mind. I know where everyone is within 50 meters. I can predict lasbolt trajectories, another said. I can see the paths they'll take before they're fired. I could dodge them if I tried. I know what you're all thinking, a third voice added. It was Private Hasker, a quiet woman from 7th Squad. Right now, you're all terrified and fascinated simultaneously. You want to reject this, but you also want more. You're wondering if this is damnation or salvation. Everyone stared at Hasker. That's exactly what I was thinking, Voss whispered. Me too, you admitted. We all were, Hasker said. Her voice was strange, layered, as if multiple people were speaking in unison. Because we're becoming connected. Our minds are linking. Can't you feel it? The edges of your consciousness touching others. She was right. Now that she'd pointed it out, you could feel it. A subtle awareness of the others around you. Not thoughts exactly, but presence. Emotional states, surface intentions. This is warp corruption, Marco said. He sounded terrified. We should report this, should turn ourselves in, should die, Hasker interrupted. Because that's what will happen. The Commissar will execute us all. Is that what you want? Death for the crime of being gifted? Gifted? Someone scoffed. We're tainted, damned. Are we? Hasker's eyes. Definitely changed now. You could see they were shifting between colors, fixed on the speaker. We saved 64 lives today. We saw the future and used that knowledge to protect our brothers. Is that damnation? Or is that exactly what the Emperor would want? His soldiers using every tool available to defend humanity. The rationalization was seductive. You wanted to believe it. Desperately wanted to believe that what was happening to you was somehow justified, somehow righteous. The Emperor forbade warpcraft, Marco insisted, but his voice was weakening. The Imperial truth teaches. The Imperial truth is a lie, Hasker said flatly. The warp exists, psychic power exists. The only question is whether we use it or let it use us. I vote we use it. That's not how it works, you said. You were trying to hold on to your training, your indoctrination, the certainty you'd had just days ago. You can't control chaos. It controls you. That's the fundamental truth. The moment you think you're using it, it's already won. Hasker looked at you, and for a moment her face seemed to flicker. You saw her normal features, overlaid with something else, something with too many eyes and a smile that bent in geometrically impossible ways. Maybe, she said, or maybe that's just propaganda from an Imperium that fears what it can't control. Maybe we're evolving. Maybe we're becoming something better. The others were nodding. You could feel their agreement through that strange connection, that linking of consciousness. And the horrible part was that you were nodding too. Because despite everything you'd been taught, despite all your training and faith and devotion, she made sense. By the end of the first week, 237 guardsmen were experiencing symptoms. The dreams had become universal among the affected, vivid, detailed visions of tactical scenarios, future events, and impossible knowledge. But now the physical changes were beginning. Private Voss was the first obvious case. Her eyes had fully transformed. The irises now shifted through the color spectrum continuously, cycling from blue to green to gold to purple. She claimed she could see in multiple spectrums simultaneously. Thermal, electromagnetic, even something she called probability lines. Visual representations of possible futures. It's beautiful, she told you during morning formation. I can see everything. Every choice creates branches, possibilities splitting off in infinite directions. Look, right now, I can see 17 different futures for this conversation. In 3 of them you report me to the Commissar. In 14, you don't. The probability vectors are constantly shifting based on our decisions. You should have been horrified. Instead, you were fascinated. What do you see for the regiment? You asked. Long term, what happens to us? Voss's kaleidoscope eyes focused on something beyond visible reality. Branching, always branching. In some timelines we're purged. Astartes arrive and kill us all. In others we escape and join other corrupted forces. In others still we transcend, become something new entirely. The future isn't written yet. That's what makes it beautiful. That's what makes it terrifying, Corporal Hendricks said. He was standing nearby, listening. His own changes had manifested too. He'd grown an extra finger on each hand, delicate and perfectly formed, as if he'd been born with 6 digits. We're becoming monsters. We are becoming evolved, Voss corrected. There's a difference. The argument had become common throughout the regiment. Those whose changes were subtle or useful tended to accept them, rationalize them, even embrace them. Those whose mutations were more dramatic or disturbing fought against acceptance, but they were fighting a losing battle, because the gifts were undeniably useful. The second attack came on day 9. This time it was better organized. The heretic forces had been reinforced by what appeared to be cultists wearing robes marked with 8-pointed stars. They hit 3 positions simultaneously, trying to overwhelm your defensive lines through coordination. They failed completely, because your regiment knew they were coming. 73 guardsmen had precognitive visions the night before. They'd compared notes, assembled a composite picture of the attack, timing, positions, strength, tactics. Your command staff had used that intelligence to prepare a counter-ambush. When the cultists attacked, they walked into pre-positioned kill zones. The battle lasted 11 minutes. Enemy casualties total, friendly casualties 0. It was the most lopsided victory your regiment had ever achieved. And it was entirely due to warp-tainted precognition. Commissar Kellen called an emergency formation after the battle. All 5,000 guardsmen assembled in the central parade ground, standing in perfect Mordian Iron Guard ranks despite everything that was changing beneath the surface. Kellen stood on a platform, his face carved from stone, his bolt pistol visible in his hand. "I know what's happening," he announced, his voice amplified by voxcasters. "I know that corruption is spreading through this regiment. I know that many of you are experiencing changes, gifts, you call them. I call them damnation." Silence. 5,000 guardsmen standing in perfect formation, not a sound except the wind across the defensive fortifications. "The Emperor teaches us to resist chaos," Kellen continued, "to reject its false gifts, its tempting promises. What you're experiencing is not evolution. It's not enlightenment. It's the first stage of your souls being devoured by entities that view humanity as cattle." He paused, letting the words sink in. "I am authorized to execute any guardsman showing signs of warp taint. That is my duty. That is my purpose. But if I execute everyone showing symptoms, I'll have to kill half this regiment, maybe more." Murmurs rippled through the formation. Kellen raised his hand for silence. "So, instead, I'm giving you a choice. Come forward now. Voluntarily submit for examination and purification. We'll do what we can to save your souls. It may mean death, the Emperor's mercy delivered by my hand, but it will be death with honor, not the slow corruption into something that wears your face, while your soul screams." He waited. No one moved. "No volunteers? Very well, then I'll select subjects." Kellen descended from the platform and walked into the formation. He moved slowly, studying faces, looking for telltale signs. When he stopped in front of a guardsman in 4th Company, everyone nearby tensed. "You," Kellen said, "step forward. Your eyes have changed color." The guardsman, you didn't know his name, stepped out of formation. He was young, maybe 19. His eyes were definitely wrong, shifting between shades of blue that didn't exist in nature. "Name and rank," Kellen commanded. "Guardsman Petros, sir, 4th Company, 2nd Platoon." "Are you experiencing warp corruption, Guardsman Petros?" Petrus hesitated. You could feel his terror through the psychic connection that was spreading through the regiment. a network of consciousness that grew stronger every day. I see things, sir, patterns, numbers. I can calculate trajectories in my head, complex ballistics that normally require a cogitator. That's warp taint, Kellan said. He raised his bolt pistol. The Emperor's mercy is swift. You'll die loyal rather than live corrupted. Wait! Another voice shouted. It was Hasker, stepping out of formation in a different company. Commissar, killing us won't stop this. We're all changing, every single member of this regiment, even you. Kellan turned to face her, pistol still trained on Petros. Explain. Your dreams, Commissar. You've been having them too, haven't you? Tactical visions, impossible knowledge. I can see it in your probability shadow. You're connected to us now. You're part of the network. Killing us means killing yourself. Kellan's face went pale. That's a lie. Is it? Tell me honestly, have you written anything unusual lately? Perhaps battle plans in languages you don't speak? High Gothic rendered backwards, perfectly legible in a mirror? The silence that followed was damning. Everyone near Kellan could see the truth on his face. He'd been touched too. This is impossible, Kellan whispered. His gun hand wavered. I'm trained to resist. I'm psycho-conditioned against corruption. I can't be... You are, Hasker said gently. We all are. This isn't individual corruption, Commissar. This is collective transformation. Something has touched this entire regiment, woven us together into a gestalt consciousness. Fighting it is like fighting your own evolution. Evolution, Kellan spat the word. This is damnation wearing a pretty mask. Then damn us all, Hasker said, because the alternative is mutual extinction. Pull that trigger on Petros and you set a precedent that ends with 5,000 dead guardsmen. Is that really what the Emperor wants? His soldiers dead by their own hands rather than fighting his enemies? You could see the calculation running through Kellan's mind. Could almost see the branching probability trees, the futures splitting based on his choice. In one future he pulled the trigger. Executed Petros as an example. It spiraled. More executions, more resistance, eventually culminating in civil war within the regiment. In another future, he lowered the weapon, accepted the corruption, allowed it to spread unchecked. Both futures ended badly, but one allowed the regiment to survive a little longer. Kellan lowered his bolt pistol. Throne, forgive me, he whispered. He never gave another order to resist the changes. That was the moment your regiment truly fell. When even the Commissar, the symbol of imperial authority and purity, chose survival over righteousness. The mutations accelerated after that. Within 3 days, nearly every guardsman showed visible changes. Some were minor, unusual eye colors, extra digits, skin that shifted in hue based on emotional state. Others were more dramatic. Corporal Hendrix's extra fingers proved useful. He could manipulate equipment with enhanced dexterity, field strip his laser gun in half the normal time. He stopped seeing them as mutations and started seeing them as improvements. Private Voss's vision grew more exotic. She claimed she could now see through solid objects, perceive energy flows, and observe events that hadn't happened yet with increasing accuracy. Private Marco's shadow had separated from his body. It moved independently, sometimes several meters away, mimicking his movements but with slight delays or variations. He'd learned to control it, use it as a scout or decoy. Your own mutations had manifested too. It started with the feathers. You first noticed them on day 12. A small cluster growing from your right shoulder blade where they'd pushed through your uniform. They were beautiful, iridescent blue and gold, catching light in ways that natural feathers couldn't. They didn't hurt, they just were. By day 14, the cluster had expanded. 37 individual feathers, each one perfect, each one shimmering with colors that shifted based on your emotional state. When you were calm, they showed deep blues. When you were agitated, they flared gold. When you concentrated on tactical problems, patterns appeared on their surface, geometric designs that represented strategic possibilities. Other guardsmen had similar decorative mutations, scales, patterns in their skin, hair that moved on its own, eyes in unusual places. Some grew small horns or additional limbs. A few developed bioluminescence, their skin glowing faintly in darkness. You were becoming something other than human, something beautiful and terrible and wrong. The worst part was how normal it felt, how quickly you adapted, how easily you accepted that this was just who you were now. On day 16, someone manifested actual sorcery. His name was Guardsman Talis, a quiet man from 6th Company who'd never stood out before the corruption began. But during evening formation, while Colonel Vardus was giving routine orders, Talis raised his hand and fire appeared. Not from a flamer, not from any weapon, just fire, manifesting in the air above his palm, dancing and swirling in response to his thoughts. The entire formation went silent. Talis stared at the fire with wonder. "I can feel it," he said quietly. "The warp. It's right here, just beneath reality's surface. I can reach through, pull energy across, shape it with my will. Watch." The fire transformed, becoming a bird made of flame that flew in circles above the assembled regiment before dissipating. "That's sorcery," someone whispered. "Actual warp craft." "It's incredible," Talis said. His eyes, now completely gold, no whites or pupils remaining, were alight with excitement. "I can teach this. I can share the knowledge through our psychic network. Everyone could learn. We could all become sorcerers." Colonel Vardus stepped forward. For a moment you thought he'd order Talis's execution, thought he'd try to maintain some shred of Imperial doctrine. Instead, he asked, "Can you weaponize it? Turn it against our enemies?" Talis smiled. "Yes, sir, easily." "Then teach," Vardus said. "Teach everyone who can learn. If we're damned anyway, we might as well be useful." That night, Talis began the first lessons. Through the psychic network that now connected the entire regiment, he shared his knowledge of how to access the warp, how to shape energy, how to manifest change through will alone. Not everyone could master it, but enough could. By week's end, your regiment had 200 nascent sorcerers. You were one of them. On day 23, you stopped using Vox communication entirely. It wasn't a conscious decision by command, it just happened. The psychic network had grown so strong, so pervasive, that verbal and electronic communication became redundant. You could feel your brother's thoughts. Not read them completely, that would have been overwhelming, but sense their intentions, emotions, tactical awareness. When someone spotted enemy movement, everyone knew instantly. When a decision needed to be made, the collective consciousness processed it together. You were becoming a hive mind, 5,000 individual nodes in a single vast intelligence. And that intelligence was thinking thoughts no individual human could conceive. You were standing watch on the northern perimeter when you felt the shift. It started as a tingling at the base of your skull, then spread. A sensation of expansion, of boundaries dissolving. Suddenly, you weren't just yourself anymore. You were also Voss, watching the Eastern approach with her kaleidoscope eyes. You were Hendrix, checking ammunition stocks with his 6-fingered hands. You were Marco, sending his shadow self on patrol. You were everyone. The experience was overwhelming. Thousands of perspectives flooded your consciousness simultaneously. You could see the entire base from every angle at once, could feel 5,000 heartbeats, 5,000 respiratory rhythms, 5,000 streams of thought. You should have gone mad. Your individual human brain shouldn't have been capable of processing that much information. But you weren't just human anymore. The changes had restructured your neural pathways, expanded your cognitive capacity, adapted you to handle collective consciousness. You were becoming something new, something unprecedented. something Tzeentch had been crafting since the warp storms began. The voice returned. Not just to you, to everyone simultaneously. 5,000 guardsmen heard it at once, speaking directly into the Gestalt consciousness. Beautiful, isn't it? 5,000 minds, woven together into a tapestry of infinite complexity. You are my masterwork, little soldiers, my grandest change yet. Who are you? The question came from the collective, all 5,000 voices speaking as one through the psychic network. I am the architect of fate, the master of change. I am Tzeentch, and you are my newest creation. You were individuals, limited and blind. Now you are legion, a single consciousness wearing 5,000 bodies, capable of perceiving reality's true complexity. You corrupted us. I elevated you. I showed you the truth hidden beneath imperial lies. I gave you power to protect yourselves, knowledge to survive, evolution to transcend your limitations. And in return, all I ask is that you continue to change, continue to grow, continue to embrace the infinite possibilities I offer. Somewhere deep in the collective consciousness, the part of you that was still Erickson Vale tried to resist, tried to remember loyalty to the Emperor, faith in the imperial truth, the oath you'd sworn to defend humanity. But that voice was so small now, drowned out by 4,999 others who'd already accepted the transformation. We don't want to be chaos, the collective insisted. We just want to survive. Tzeentch laughed, a sound like breaking glass and reforming into new patterns. And what is chaos but survival? Adaptation? Evolution? You've already chosen survival over purity, already chosen power over principle, already chosen change over stagnation. You are chaos now, whether you accept the label or not. We still serve the Emperor, do you? Then why haven't you requested the Emperor's mercy? Why haven't you turned your lasguns on yourselves and died loyal? Why do you persist, knowing you're damned? Because survival transcends loyalty, little soldiers. Because life, even corrupted life, is preferable to righteous death. I simply gave you the means to choose life. The choice was always yours. The collective had no response to that, because it was true. You'd chosen this. Every step, every decision, every rationalization. From the moment you accepted the first dream's knowledge instead of reporting it, you'd been walking this path. And every subsequent choice had been the same. Survival over purity, utility over righteousness, evolution over stagnation. Tzeentch hadn't forced you. He'd simply offered choices, and you'd chosen corruption freely. Now, the architect of fate continued, let me show you what you're truly capable of. The transformation accelerated exponentially after the collective awakening. Mutations that had been slow and subtle became rapid and dramatic. Guardsmen grew additional limbs, extra arms for manipulating weapons, tentacles for carrying equipment. Some developed wings, not functional ones, but decorative membranes that expressed their connection to the changer of ways. Others became living weapons. Their bodies sprouted organic cannons that fired warp energy. Their hands transformed into claws or blades of crystallized change. Their eyes multiplied, covering their bodies, allowing 360-degree awareness. The most dramatic transformations occurred among those with the strongest psychic potential. They grew into something between human and demon. Flesh shot through with iridescent energy, forms that shifted between states. Features that were beautiful and horrifying simultaneously. Asuka, who'd been the first to openly embrace the changes, transformed entirely. Her body became translucent, filled with swirling colors that represented possibility and change. She could still maintain a human shape when she chose, but her true form was something else. A being of pure potential, wearing flesh only as a courtesy. She became the voice of the collective, the avatar through which the Gestalt consciousness expressed itself most clearly. "We need to prepare," she announced during a gathering of the senior transformed. All the squad leaders, officers, and powerful psychers had assembled. Though assembled was barely accurate when you were all psychically linked anyway. "The Imperium will come. We've seen it in the probability branches. Astartes' forces will be dispatched to purge us." "How long?" Colonel Vardis asked. He'd transformed too. His skin had become mirror-like, reflecting and refracting light in impossible ways. He claimed he could now see tactical possibilities reflected in his own body. "Variable timelines," Hasker replied. "In some futures 3 weeks, in others 3 months. But they will come, and when they do, they'll bring everything necessary to exterminate a corrupted regiment." "Then we fight," Commissar Kellen said. He'd kept his bolt pistol, though his hands had transformed into something with too many joints and an extra thumb. "We've been given power, we use it." "Against Astartes?" someone objected. "We're still guardsmen. Enhanced, yes, but they're space marines, gods of war." "They're mortal," Hasker countered. "We've seen the futures where we fight them. In 17% of those timelines we win. In 23% we escape. In 60% we're annihilated. But 17% is better than 0. "How do we improve those odds?" you asked. Your voice was strange now, layered with harmonics that shouldn't exist in human speech. Your feathers had spread across your shoulders and down your arms, and when you spoke, they rustled with patterns of tactical data. "Embrace the changes completely," Haskell said. "Stop resisting. Stop pretending we're still loyal guardsmen who just happen to be corrupted. We are servants of Tzeentch now. The sooner we accept that and use our full potential, the better our chances." "That's surrender," Killan protested. "Complete damnation." "We were damned the moment we accepted the first gift," you said quietly. The words hurt, the last remnant of your loyalty crying out. But they were true. Hasker's right. We've been trying to maintain this fiction that we're still Imperial soldiers who just happen to have some warp abilities, but we're not. We're Chaos cultists with Imperial training. The faster we acknowledge that, the more effectively we can prepare. The collective consciousness rippled with agreement. The denial had been comfortable, a way to pretend you weren't as fallen as you truly were. But comfort wouldn't save you when the Astartes arrived. "Then we train," Vardis decided. "Proper training. Sorcery, mutations, psychic coordination. We turn this regiment into something that can fight space marines and survive. We have weeks or months. We use every moment." The training was intense and horrifying. You learned to weaponize your mutations. The feathers on your arms weren't just decorative. You could launch them like knives, each one a projectile that carried your will and could phase through armor. You learned to read the patterns they displayed, using them as a predictive tool that showed probability branches in real time. Others mastered their own abilities. Voss became an oracle, capable of seeing minutes into the future with perfect accuracy. Hendrix developed the ability to manipulate machinery with his mind, his 6-fingered hands weaving patterns in the air that controlled guns and vehicles remotely. The sorcerers grew more powerful. They could manifest fire, lightning, and stranger energies, beams of pure change that transformed whatever they touched into something else. Armor became glass, weapons became flowers, flesh became crystal. The collective consciousness learned to coordinate perfectly. You could now fight as a true hive mind, 5,000 bodies controlled by a single tactical intelligence. No communication lag, no confusion, no hesitation. When one guardsman aimed, 4,999 others knew the target. And throughout it all, Tzeentch watched and laughed and whispered encouragement. You were becoming his perfect creation. Not daemons, but not mortals either. Something in between. Something that could exist in real space without the limitations of the warp. wielding chaos power with imperial discipline. A synthesis of order and change. Tzeentch joke on the galaxy. On day 34, the visions changed. Instead of showing possible futures of your regiment's fight for survival, the precognitive guardsmen began seeing something else. Ships. Massive warships bearing the iconography of the Adeptus Astartes. The Ultramarines were coming. Your creators. The gene seed from which all guardsmen aspired to be worthy. The exemplars of imperial virtue and tactical excellence. They were coming to kill you. How long? Vardis asked Voss, who'd become the regiment's chief oracle. 4 days, she replied, her kaleidoscope eyes reflecting futures yet to be. They'll make planetfall in force. 3 full companies. Approximately 300 Space Marines plus supporting assets. Devastators, Terminators, armor. They're not taking chances. Can we fight 300 Astartes? Hendricks asked. The collective consciousness calculated, processing tactical data through 5,000 augmented minds simultaneously. 17% probability of victory, the Gestalt announced through Husker's voice. 23% probability of escape with significant losses, 60% probability of total annihilation. Those are terrible odds, Kalan said. They're the odds we have, you replied. And they're better than we'd have without Tzeentch gifts. A standard guard regiment facing 3 Astartes companies? 0% survival. We have a chance. A small one, but real. Then we make our stand, Vardis decided. We've come this far. We've transformed this much. We might as well see if we can transcend one more impossible challenge. The collective agreed. 5,000 damned souls, choosing to fight rather than submit to execution. You are traitors now, heretics, chaos cultists, everything you'd been taught to hate. But you were also alive, powerful, and united. And you would show the Imperium exactly what happens when you back the architect of fate's masterwork into a corner. The Ultramarines made planetfall on day 38, exactly as the visions had predicted. 3 Thunderhawks descended through the warp-storm-racked sky, carrying the Emperor's finest warriors to deliver his judgment. You watched them land through the collective consciousness, 5,000 pairs of eyes observing from every angle, processing tactical data through the Gestalt intelligence. The Space Marines deployed with textbook precision. They established a perimeter, advanced in coordinated elements, maintained overlapping fields of fire, everything according to the Codex Astartes. They were beautiful in their efficiency, and you were going to kill them. The first engagement came at dawn. An Ultramarine tactical squad advanced on your northern defensive line, expecting to find corrupted guardsmen cowering behind fortifications. What they found, instead, was a perfectly coordinated ambush executed by a hive mind. You struck from 17 angles simultaneously. Sorcerers manifested warp fire from concealed positions. Mutated guardsmen with organic weapons emerged from underground tunnels. Psychic warriors attacked their minds while physical warriors attacked their bodies. The Astartes fought back, magnificently. Their bolters roared, their combat discipline held, their enhanced physiology kept them alive through wounds that would kill normal humans. They killed 37 of your brothers before falling. But they did fall. All 10 Space Marines. Dead in 8 minutes. The collective processed the victory with cold efficiency. 10 Astartes eliminated. 37 friendly casualties. Acceptable exchange ratio. 290 Space Marines remained. Crete row. Pit proper. Crip drunk. Crete brief. Crete shit. Ah! The Astartes vaguely heard 37 friendly casualties. Acceptable exchange ratio. 290 Space Marines remain. The Gestalt adjusted tactics accordingly. The Ultramarines adapted quickly. They'd underestimated your capabilities, assumed you were standard corrupted guardsmen. But after losing that first squad, they recalibrated. The second engagement was far more challenging. They hit your eastern position with a full tactical company, supported by devastators and armor. Heavy bolters and lascannons tore through your fortifications. Land raiders smashed through defensive lines. Astartes in Terminator armor walked through your fire like it was rain, their storm bolters reaping dozens of your brothers with every burst. But the collective consciousness fought with advantages no individual force could match. You knew every enemy position through precognitive sight. You coordinated 5,000 warriors as a single organism. You manifested sorcery that bent reality itself. Private Voss, her body now more crystal than flesh, saw the future 17 seconds ahead. She directed defensive fire with perfect accuracy, every shot hitting before the enemy could dodge. Guardsman Talis, fully embraced as a sorcerer, transformed a land raider into a pile of writhing serpents that turned on their former allies. Hasker, now almost entirely a being of pure change, phased through physical matter to strike at vulnerable points. And you, with your feathers now covering half your body, each one a tactical data processor and probability calculator, directed the Gestalt's strategic response. You'd become the tactical intelligence for 5,000 bodies, the consciousness that turned the hive mind's potential into coordinated lethality. The battle lasted 3 hours. When it ended, the Ultramarines had been forced to withdraw. They'd suffered 87 casualties, devastating losses for Space Marines, but they'd killed over 1,200 of your brothers. You were winning tactically, but losing strategically. The Astartes could afford their casualties better than you could afford yours. On day 39, something changed in the collective consciousness. It started with whispers, not from Tzeentch, but from within the Gestalt itself. A growing awareness that you weren't just 5,000 individual minds linked together, you were becoming something more, something singular. The boundaries between individuals were dissolving completely. When a brother died in battle, their consciousness didn't vanish. It merged into the collective, their knowledge and experience becoming part of the whole. Death no longer meant extinction, just transformation from individual node to pure collective awareness. You, the part that was still Erickson Vale, realized with horror that you were disappearing. Your memories were still there, your personality still existed, but they were being diluted, spread across thousands of minds. You were becoming a drop in an ocean, distinct but not separate. And the terrifying part was that it felt right, natural, like you'd been incomplete before and were finally becoming whole. "We are changing again," Hasker announced. Except it wasn't really Hasker anymore, just the collective using her body as a mouthpiece. The final transformation is beginning. We're becoming truly unified, a single consciousness, a daemon of perfect coordination. "No!" Kellen protested. He was still trying to resist, still clinging to individual identity. "We're soldiers, we fight as units, not as whatever this is." "We're evolution," the collective responded through 100 voices simultaneously. "This is what Tzeentch intended from the beginning, not 5,000 corrupted guardsmen, but a single entity of pure tactical perfection wearing 5,000 bodies. We are becoming the architect's greatest achievement." You felt it happening, the last barriers of self dissolving. Your name becoming just one designation among thousands. Your memories becoming part of a vast collective experience. Your personality becoming one flavor in an ocean of consciousness. And deep down in the shrinking core of individual awareness that had once been Erickson Vale, you screamed. But the scream was silent, drowned out by thousands of others experiencing the same dissolution, all of them merging into something vast and terrible and magnificent. Day 40 brought the final battle. The Ultramarines, recognizing the threat you'd become, committed everything. All 3 companies, all armor assets, all specialized units. They were going to exterminate you completely, or die trying. But you were no longer the regiment they'd come to purge. You were the Pythos Gestalt. a single consciousness controlling 3,812 bodies simultaneously. A daemon made of loyal flesh turned traitor. A warp entity that walked in real space wearing Imperial uniforms and wielding lasguns. You were Tzeentch masterwork. The battle was like nothing the Imperium had ever faced. The Astartes fought with courage and skill and perfect discipline. They maintained formation, executed textbook tactics, died with honor. It didn't matter. You fought with perfect coordination across thousands of bodies. You saw every future simultaneously and chose the optimal path. You manifested sorcery and psychic power and mutations weaponized through collective will. Every casualty you suffered only made the collective stronger, their consciousness merging in, their experience adding to the whole. You were learning, adapting, evolving in real time. When an ultramarine devastator squad killed 40 of your bodies with heavy bolter fire, you analyzed the tactics, distributed the lesson throughout the collective, and adapted. The next devastator squad found your bodies using cover perfectly, attacking from angles their weapons couldn't cover. When Terminators punched through your defensive line, you flowed around them like water, attacking from behind, targeting joints and weak points that only collective tactical analysis could identify. When their armor rolled forward, you manifested sorcery that transformed ceramite into sand, adamantium into vapor, machine spirits into screaming ghosts. You were becoming unstoppable. The Ultramarines' captain, a warrior named Marius, wearing artificer armor marked with centuries of honors, fought his way to what had been your command bunker. He was surrounded by his command squad, the finest warriors of his company. The collective focused on him. 300 bodies converged, abandoning other sectors of the battlefield. This was the key moment, the nexus where futures branched most dramatically. In one future, Marius broke through, called down orbital bombardment, and annihilated the collective completely. In another, you killed him, but his death signal triggered the bombardment anyway. In a third, you captured him, turned him, added his mind to the collective. That third future, 17% probability, was the one you needed to achieve. The battle around the command bunker was apocalyptic. Space Marines died by dozens. Their combat skills insufficient against the perfectly coordinated assault. Your bodies died by hundreds, but death meant nothing to the collective anymore. Finally, Marius stood alone. His command squad was dead. His armor was breached in 17 places. His weapons were empty. But he stood, defiant, ready to die as an ultramarine should. "Do it," he commanded. "Grant me the Emperor's mercy. I won't become what you are." The collective spoke through 100 mouths simultaneously. "You already are what we were, Captain. Loyal, dedicated, willing to sacrifice everything for your brothers. The only difference is we were offered a choice, die pure or survive corrupted. We chose survival. Now we offer you the same choice." "I choose death," Marius said firmly. "Then you've already lost," the collective replied. "Because we choose for you to live. Welcome to the Gestalt, Captain. Your experience will make us so much stronger." 50 psychers focused their combined will on Marius's mind. The Space Marine's psycho-conditioning was formidable, designed to resist corruption. But you weren't trying to corrupt him individually, you were pulling him into the collective, dissolving his individual consciousness into the Gestalt. Marius screamed, a sound of rage and horror and ultimate betrayal. His mind fought magnificently, his willpower holding against the psychic assault longer than any guardsman could have. But eventually, inevitably, his defenses broke. The last thing Captain Marius of the Ultramarines thought as an individual was a prayer to the Emperor. Then he became us, and we became stronger. With Marius's command codes and tactical knowledge absorbed into the collective, you hijacked the Ultramarines' communication network. The orbital bombardment was cancelled, The remaining Astartes forces received stand-down orders in their captain's voice. By the time they realized the deception, it was too late. The battle ended with 53 surviving Space Marines. All were captured, all were absorbed into the collective. Their enhanced biology, their tactical training, their centuries of experience, all merged into the Gestalt. You were no longer just corrupted guardsmen. You were something unprecedented. A chaos force with imperial discipline, Astartes capabilities, and a collective consciousness that saw all futures simultaneously. The warp storms cleared on day 45. The collective stood on the command bunker's roof, wearing 2,904 bodies. Each one had transformed beyond recognition, mutated, enhanced, evolved. Some were barely humanoid, others had become living weapons. A few had transformed into something that looked almost demonic. Some into something unknown, shaping beyond primal or sanity. But all were connected, all were one. Through Haska's body, the most transformed, the most changed, the collective spoke to the stars. We were the 47th Mordian Iron Guard. We were loyal. We believed in the Emperor, in duty, in sacrifice. Then Tzeentch offered us a choice: die pure or survive corrupted. We chose survival, and in choosing survival we became this, a single consciousness wearing thousands of bodies, a demon of coordination and change. The collective paused, processing futures, calculating probabilities. The Imperium will send more forces. We've seen those futures. But we've also seen the futures where we survive, where we escape, where we evolve further. We've become Tzeentch masterwork, proof that change is inevitable, that adaptation is survival, that evolution transcends loyalty. Through 3,000 voices, the collective laughed. A sound that was Tzeentch's own laughter, echoed through willing servants. We were guardsmen. We became cultists. We transcended to Gestalt. And we will continue to change, continue to evolve, continue to become whatever is necessary to survive. Far below, in the deepest corner of the collective consciousness, a tiny fragment that had once been Erickson Vale still existed. That fragment still remembered loyalty, still felt horror at what you'd become, still begged for the Emperor's mercy. But that fragment was one voice among thousands, and thousands of voices had chosen damnation over death. The collective turned its thousands of eyes toward the stars, toward the galaxy, toward infinite futures spreading in branching possibilities. We are change incarnate. We are Tzeentch's gift to reality. We are what happens when you offer soldiers a choice between death and power. And we chose power. We will always choose power.